Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining this evening in this another event that Law and Society Alliance is hosting. We are a Delhi-based think tank, and we have chosen a very interesting topic and a very relevant and contemporary topic to discuss today. Communist China's doublespeak in aiding Pakistan-based terrorists at the United Nations Security Council whenever there is an attempt by any country, including India, to name and shame any of the terrorists who are based in Pakistan, who are being aided and hosted by the Pakistani inter-services intelligence. The Chinese come to their aid, they come to their help, and protect them from being named and shamed. We are going to be discussing that. This discussion comes at a day after India abstained from voting against Communist China at the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva. But India has made up for that decision by announcing at a media briefing conducted by the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson that they have serious concerns, that India has serious concerns over the human rights of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, which is the original name of Xinjiang. And we are pretty happy that this kind of a impressive change has happened in the stand. For the first time, probably, India has openly talked about the Uyghur issues in a media briefing by the Ministry of External Affairs. We are pretty happy with that because we have been campaigning and championing the cause of human rights of Uyghurs, Tibetans, and others who are under Chinese communist rule at this point in time. Uh, India had long ago taken the stand not to support any nation. Actually, why India did not support this resolution in the Human Rights Council meeting was that we have taken a stand that any nation-specific human rights resolutions at any human meeting, we will not, stand by that resolution. This is a stand. It not only bailed out communist China on the question of genocide of Uyghurs in East Pakistan, but it was also a missed opportunity for India. I'm saying this because this bailing out by India flies in the face of Communist Party of China has ruled Beijing's anti-India stand on terrorism at the United Nations Security Council. In fact, history has shown that Communist China has never extended any of the courtesies that India has extended to it in the last 70 odd years. Rather, Communist China has always stood against India's interest in all international fora, be it at the UN, be it the issue of United Nations Security Council's permanent membership, permanent membership for India, or the membership at the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Communist China has also stood against Indian interests by opposing the United Nations Security Council's naming and shaming of Pakistan-based terrorists. Communist China has single-handedly blocked the sanctioning of three Pakistani ISI-aided and harbored anti-India terrorists this year, just this year, 2022, including the latest that happened last month against the 26/11 Mumbai terrorist strike mastermind Sajid Mir. Communist China has used its special position as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council to scuttle the resolutions at the UNSC mandated 1267 Al Qaeda Sanctions Committee to list Sajid Mir as a global terrorist. But this Communist China move against India on global terrorism, it's basically to protect the Pakistani interests, is nothing new. This has been going on since at least 2008, after the 26/11 Mumbai terror strike. We all know about that dastardly attack that took place. Uh, we lost a lot of people in that terrorist attack. But this communist China move, basically, I'm trying to give a timeline of how India's effort to name and shame Pakistan-based terrorists has been scuttled by communist China over the years. In 2009, after the Mumbai attacks, of course, India moved an independent terror designation proposal against Masood Azhar, but China blocked the move. Again, in 2016, actually after 7 years of that first attempt, India again proposed listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist, and this was supported by UK, the United Kingdom, uh, the US, and France. But China was the one which blocked the move again. In 2017, again, all these nations came together with the third proposal. Again, China blocked it. In 2019, after the Pulwama attacks on the CRPF personnel, India called on 25 envoys of different nations to highlight the role of Islamabad, which funds and promotes and strengthens global terrorism. India's move then in that year, which was the fourth proposal, demanding Masood Azhar's listing, fortunately passed because of China lifted its technical hold on that resolution. So again, of course, in June 2022, China blocked another proposal by India and the US to list Abdul Rahim Maki as a global terrorist. And in August, it blocked a joint India-US proposal to list Jaish-e-Mohammed's deputy chief Abdul Rauf Azhar as another UNSC designated terrorist. And of course, the latest Sajid Mir incident has happened. These actions of stopping any Pakistan-based terrorists to be named and shamed is nothing but direct support and aid to anti-India terrorists. And the Indian government must treat the actions of Communist China that way. This is what Law and Society Alliance believes. But I'm not an expert. I'm a generalist. I have interest in several subjects, and China is one of them, and Pakistan is another. So, but let us go and hear the experts on the subject. I will now introduce the three speakers of the day, not in any particular order, but with respect to the seniority of General Rakesh Sharma. I will introduce him first, and then the other two speakers. So, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma is currently a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation, which is one of the popular Delhi-based think tanks. He is a retired Indian Army officer, having been commissioned in the Gorkha Rifles and having had a military career that lasted 40 years. So, very well experienced, in fact. So, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma is also a scholar warrior, having attended the prestigious National Defense College in New Delhi during his military service. He was a research fellow at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis and has got a PhD, a doctorate in defense studies. General Rakesh Sharma commanded the Fire and Fury Corps in Ladakh, which is headquartered in Leh, and it is responsible for Kargil, Siachen Glacier in eastern Ladakh, where the current military crisis is on. Of course, this particular formation faces both Pakistan and China. So he is the apt person to talk on this subject, which deals with both Pakistan and China. The general was, before he retired, was an adjutant general of the Indian Army, responsible for human resources management, and he superannuated in 2017. So my next speaker, whom I'm going to introduce, is Abhijit Iyer Mitra. I can see him here. Thank you for joining, Abhijit. He is a senior research fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in, again, a Delhi-based think tank. And his research focuses on defense issues, and he specializes in defense economics, technology and procurement, and of course, nuclear dynamics. He also deals with the governance issues and non-traditional security threats. He has been a visiting fellow at Sandia National Laboratory in New Mexico and Stimson Center, Washington, D.C. He holds a master's in international relations from Monash University, Melbourne. Thank you, Abhijit, for joining. The third speaker of the day is Savio Rodrigues. He is a journalist and is the editor-in-chief of the Goa Chronicle, which is his media venture. He's also, interestingly, a mix of several identities. He is also a politician, having contested the recent Goa Assembly elections on a Bharatiya Janata Party ticket from Vellum constituency. He has lived and studied in Dubai and has built a professional career in media, environmental science, and technology. His favorite subjects of study and research include law, politics, and religion, and he's a technology buff. A few administrative announcements before I go to Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma as the first speaker of the day. Kindly mute your mics, all participants, so that there is no disturbance as a mark of respect for the speakers when they are delivering their presentations. Also, if you have any bandwidth issues, kindly switch off your video so that your audio you are able to hear the speakers much clearly and your audio is clear. So that is basically to ensure that the message is sent across, whatever the speakers are saying today. Also, the Muting of mics will help us to record the session and share it widely with a larger audience. If you have any questions as the speakers speak or otherwise, please post it in the chat box and also mention the speaker to whom you want to address it. I will take it after all the three speakers have finished the representations, the initial briefings for the day. Each speaker will get about 15 minutes to speak, and then we'll take up the questions and then probably concluding remarks if we still have time. We intend to finish it in a 1 hour, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. That's the maximum time we are going to give ourselves for this evening. So with that brief opening remarks, let me first call Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma sir to speak. He's my mentor. I've known him for a long time, and I thank him for honoring me by joining this event. Sir, please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bhupender, for inviting me and for the society. You say you're not an expert, but in your introductory remarks, you covered the entire script that I was about to speak. So you've stolen the march on this one. And second one is that if you had to remove the speakers by seniority, then Abhijit is far senior by virtue of his intellect. So, I mean, I would have much loved to hear Abhijit then, of course, as you say. So you made a base here as to Chinese. Now, I first wish to contest is whether Chinese are doing doublespeak or Chinese are actually speaking what they speak. I mean, there is no doublespeak this is the title of today's thing. This is what the Chinese do. So there is no doublespeak at all. This is actually, frankly, if we were not expecting the Chinese to do about Sajid Mir, which they did on 17th of September, well, we would have been mistaken. That's the way Chinese move. Now, firstly, Sajid Mir is well known to us. He's not a new fellow. He's been Lashkar commander for a very long time. And now I'm told in Pakistan jail. Some time ago, they said Pakistan said he is killed. He's no more alive. You know, all this gets related to FATF because the FATF is a issue with Pakistan, the grey list. And at the time of the grey list, now again the grey list is around the corner. So anytime grey list comes around, they start talking about people having died and not existing in Pakistan. And then suddenly they found him and he was jailed for 15 years under two separate heads, 8 years plus 7 years. And we have been looking for Mir for very long time. 2611, he was the man who recruited. He sent David Hadley for doing reconnaissance in India. So he is a renowned figure in this one. And also he was involved in the Danish newspaper attack which happened in France. So he is a well-known and a renowned. So, I mean, Chinese having blocked up is one issue, and discuss the issue as to why I feel Chinese have blocked him. Second is about these two gentlemen which were blocked. I should have called gentlemen, two terrorists who were blocked in the month of August, which is Abdul Rahman Makki, and of course, who's a LET deputy chief, and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the deputy chief called Rauf Asghar. Rauf Asghar is a brother of the chief of the Masood Azhar, the chief of the JEM. So they were both blocked here, and you rightly pointed out in case of Masood Azhar, it took 10 years for the Chinese to relent. In 2019, they started in 2008, and it's 2019 that they finally relented after the Pulwama attack and allowed Masood Azhar's name to be included in the 1267 committee. Now, this is a regular feature, and I mean, we know we have been involved in 1267 committee from the right of the time it was formulated in 1999. I think the committee came up, and then of course it was further strengthened in subsequently after the 9/11 attacks, and then of course Taliban was moved away from this committee, and Taliban, a separate committee came up, and 1267 committee, which actually now lists all terrorists and lays down the regulations how terrorists should be managed, became largely Al Qaeda and ISIL committee, which is Daesh, which Daesh and Al Qaeda committee. Subsequently, it's ISIL, and that committee listing actually also brings, if it were listing, also brings ill fame to the country hosting the terrorists, like Pakistan, for that matter. So there is this issue. This base has already been made by you, and so having said that, why does China do this? China itself has got problems on its own. So why would Chinese, who suffered from internal terrorism in Xinjiang would resort to this kind of issues of blocking, technical blocking of the technical hold on listing of these people, and they can take up to 10 years. They keep continuing these issues here for by not allowing a technical hold. Technical hold implies that they will seek more and more information on this one. Sajid Mir's name was proposed by United States and India both together in a joint resolution. So it mattered in that manner. So I have three larger issues to make on why I feel that the Chinese would do a thing like this. The Chinese have issues of terrorism, and they suffer quite a bit in Xinjiang. It's a restive province. We know the resolution which we abstained recently on human rights. But then there is a issue which has been persisting in China for a very long time on Xinjiang. There is one major organization called ETIM, the East Turkestan Independence Movement. But then there are actually 15 organizations of this kind which are functioning in Xinjiang in one garb or the other, all underground, who are giving rise to terrorism inside China. So therefore, by virtue of this internal issues that exist in China, it would have been logical for the Chinese to accept, yeah, one terrorist is a terrorist and can be any country. They should have accepted the issue and banked on it. The first issue that I raise here is about this ETIM business. Now, for long, ETIM has been said to have links with the ISIS based organization in Afghanistan. The normal cadre about 700-800, and all these organizations are, ek thali ke chatte batte hain. You can't say Taliban is not related to ISIS and ISIS is not related to TTP, which is the Pakistani organization, and all other organizations. Many ways we say that the cadres also transfer from one to another. It has been stated that the cadres of Taliban has shuttled with ISIS depending on who's got the money to give at one time. So having said that, this is a very serious issue, and it is important for the Chinese to ensure that the support to these militant organizations. The Chinese have a law. They divide these people into three parts. There is a terrorist, there is a militant, and they have one more nomenclature for people who are terrorists. So there are three different type of people. So Chinese have been engaged with with Pakistan and with Afghanistan for a very long time to ensure that this ETIM and other organizations are not supported by Pakistan and by Afghanistan, and then they are not allowed to infiltrate across into these areas. So there is this one relationship which matters immensely to China, especially because Xinjiang is a problem province. All the peripheral provinces of China have a problem. Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, they all have some problem or the other. But Xinjiang has got the maximum problem because of terrorism and because of the population being Muslim and opposing the Chinese implementation of the Chinese laws and Chinese methodology into this area. So these and of course, there is an organization called World Uyghur Council, which creates a lot of noise worldwide. They are a political entity, and most of the organizations are involved there. So, first point I want to make made is that it is always important for the Chinese to make sure that the terrorism in their own side is controlled, and that there is no proxy warfare like it goes on into Jammu and Kashmir, supported by the Chinese. Supported by the Pakistanis, does not take place into Xinjiang, and then there is a hold by these people, by these two countries, Afghanistan and China. So that's one major issue why the support. There is a support here. Second issue I wish to raise. Second issue is the issue of the so-called the deeper in the seas and the higher than the mountains relationship the Chinese have with Pakistan for a very long time. The Chinese and Pakistanis have been fairly close to each other. As I mentioned, there is a CPEC. Many people say the CPEC will flounder and it won't succeed, and it will be problematic for the Pakistanis. They'll turn out to be another Sri Lanka debt crisis. All this is acceptable, but the relationship that the Pakistanis have with Chinese is tremendous. As also, there is a large amount of investment already carried out. There are problems happening on the Pakistan-Chinese front on this issue, but the Chinese have done immense amount of work on establishing, like a Lahore, the first metro rail that just come up last year. It came up in Lahore, made by the Chinese money. There are a whole lot of power stations, there are roads, and there are fiber optics cables, and so there is a issue involved here. It also stated that the Afghanis have got the immense amount of resources. So I'll talk about the resources later. But this relationship with Pakistan is a old relationship. You would be hearing often that the Pakistanis, the Chinese which are located in Pakistan get hit in one form or the other. There are a number of casualties recently. This week alone, there are 2 Chinese who were killed in a terrorist operation in Balochistan. So the Chinese are worried about their people and their investment, and also Gwadar. I'm not very sure whether Gwadar will succeed as a port in times to come, but there is investment here, and there are Chinese working. There are townships of the Chinese who are located off Gwadar. So the Chinese are worried, and they wish to maintain relationship with Pakistan to make sure that that it doesn't happen, and that actually helps them to support Pakistani views on who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist, and therefore they have done what they've done to Sajid Mate. So that's a important issue out here. Then, of course, the issue of BRI of the other countries. Now, if you see, there are 4 major roads, silk roads, that are 4 major parts of BRI which pass through Xinjiang alone, which is, as I mentioned, restricted province for Chinese. When going to Pakistan, then there are 3 others going, one to Kazakhstan, one is towards Tajikistan, one is being planned towards Iran. So there are massive connectivity being developed with the Muslim world by the Chinese, which is the Central Asian countries, and also as we watch this, the relationship which has come up with Saudi Arabia and other Iran. Chinese are a singularly well-placed people to make sure that they maintain the relationship with the Muslim world, other than Russia, of course, which had, but now, of course, Chinese are doing. So this economic corridor makes a major difference across there into in making sure that they support the request and they support the Muslim countries to a maximum extent possible. The third issue I wish to raise is about influence creation. Now, Chinese have worked assiduously into getting this influence business sorted out. In Gilgit-Baltistan alone, there are 2,000 contracts that the Chinese have taken, very close to our borders, or very close to Kargil, the other side, Skardu, or opposite the Siachen Glacier. They are prospecting uranium, they're establishing SEZs. So Gilgit-Baltistan and POK suddenly turned out to be very rich areas for mineral development. In Afghanistan, they say that Afghanistan is an underdeveloped country in raw material, that $3 trillion of raw material to be held. So the relationship that the Chinese wish to draw, Chinese are greedy people as far as raw material is concerned. So their relationship, which comes up with Pakistan, with Afghanistan, and also with Iran and then Saudi Arabia, is basically raw material based also in a big way. And therefore, they wish to make sure that they would support in all forms these countries, and then creating influence. They are buying influence. Soft power. One would hear about soft power, Joseph Nye, for a long time, but they may not be loved country across there. But they have bought influence. They have deep pockets. So having deep pockets, they have bought immense amount of influence globally, in Africa, in Latin America, in the ports being built, even in Europe, Chinese. So their relationship goes into creating influence in which they are able to manage the affairs to the best of their thing. So it is important for them to maintain this relationship with the Muslim world, with the Ummah in general, to make sure that they have the influence when they're required to do so. Like you mentioned rightly, Mr. Bipinder, this vote that happened recently at Geneva on the human right thing, there were 19 to 17 vote. It is so close that there were only 2 votes left. If just 2 votes and they would have been strictures against against China. 2 votes, one was ours. If we had not abstained and voted, it would have been nearly as close as it gets. So the creation of and the entire Europe as a bloc and United States and the Northern America as a bloc all supported the resolution which was put across by the Europe and the United States. So then what happens is that influence creation is a full-time job for the Chinese. For them, they influence in the vote that they get from, say, Pakistan or Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. All these countries assist them into getting into places of prominence. So it's not important for them that Sajid Mir is designated 1267 or not. It doesn't matter to them. The influence that they have got into all these countries matters to them much more than what one Sajid Mir or one Makki will do or one Rauf will do. Those people are people who don't matter till the time it comes totally on their head. So the issue is that influence creation, and that is why they have in 100 countries, 100 ports being built into 64 countries. A large number of these ports, they have bought it all right, from Greece to even United States. Even United States, they're getting 2 ports being built, one in Los Angeles, one in Florida. So, the Chinese are creating influence in that manner. So they are a focused country to work to their benefit. And their benefit comes from the fact that they should have no terrorism against themselves, which is sponsored by Pakistanis all through Afghanistan, Badakhshan, largely Badakhshan province and Kunduz provinces where ATIM is located. So one is to make sure that the terrorism is not spread there. Second is that they have immense amount of involvement into BRI and in Pakistan, and of course they're getting uranium, manganese. You name the number of raw material that they're picking up from Gilgit-Baltistan to take it into China. That's why Skardu airfield was enhanced to 4.5 kilometers, because they're able to lift these people. So that makes a difference. So that's second issue. And third is influence. And they want the influence of their in the African world, in the Muslim world that supports them. So I would end by saying that there is no double speak. It's purely their own interests which matter to them. For them, it doesn't matter if they're terrorists, it's causing terrorism inside India. It matters to them if Sajid Mir goes and does terrorism against China in Xinjiang. Then they will do something else. But presently, they make sure that they don't do it. So the fact of the matter is that it's a typically national interest policy that the Chinese are following, and that's the way it has to. It will continue in times to come, and technical hold for quite some time before these people are actually named there. And interestingly, say Sajid Mir has a prize of I think $5 million from the State Department in the United States. So of course he's in jail, but that's the kind of prize that they have. So I'll end by saying that to say that 1267 committee would have frozen assets of Sajid Mir or made sure that his entry exit to countries is stopped, or any arms sales across to Sajid Mir or to the other two in August which were blocked, well, I don't think it would have mattered so much. We have raised the issue. We have brought it to the international issue. It forced the Chinese in the spokesperson to give a comment on this one. It matters that it is registered in the world that the Chinese have a policy of this kind. At least, even if it's not listed in 1267, there is significant movement and making noise in the world that it needs to be done. I'll rest here and take on the questions subsequently. Thank you, Mr. Bipinder, for inviting me.
So thank you very much, sir, for those wonderfully insightful comments there on the three aspects of this issue. Thanks so much for that. I have questions, but I'll come to the questions when the question answer session comes. So we have our next speaker, Savio Rodriguez. I've already introduced him to all of you. Savio, are you able to use your microphone?
Hi, Vipendra, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Is there a problem with your video?
1 second, 1 second. You can see me now?
Not yet.
Now you should. Once.
Yeah, we can see you now. Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you for joining, Savio. You know the topic, the issue is here. I've already done the introductions. I hope
Sure.
you joined before the introductions were completed. So thank you so much for
Vipendra,
joining. Yeah, please go ahead. This
my
is your time.
my sincere gratitude for having you invited me, and it's a pleasure to share this speaking platform with my good friend Abhijit, who always makes me laugh whenever I meet him, and Mr. Rakesh Sharma as well. I think he's highlighted the issue so beautifully that it's not left anything for me to say as far as the issue is concerned. But let me tell you what I understand about the issue from a China perspective. China predominantly believes on the philosophy that an enemy's enemy is a friend. And that's exactly how they operate, right? China is a very strategic country. China never does anything if it does not interest them. So today, what you have, just as Mr. Sharma was saying, you have China planning its global strategies based on only one mission: to be the global power in the world. They know that they can take on the Americas, the Europeans, and all of them together. You should see their work in a continent like Africa and the hold that they have. I mean, you have a gentleman like Dr. Tedros, who was a part of the World Health Organization, and he continued to have a second term, even though he was complacent and neglected in his duty as far as the Director General of the World Health Organization during the COVID crisis. Our investigation into the COVID crisis, when it emerged, also indicated right at the start, at the onset, we had said it was a lab leak theory, and we put out data that was available to lead into that direction, that it was a lab leak theory. And the cover up that China as a nation did for for the COVID crisis was immense, and it had America, it had many other countries supporting it, and you had a few countries that did not, and the then president who did not support the China at that point of time. You know what was the outcome, and that's how Joe Biden came into the U.S. government. But you know, it's the power play of China, and that is really what China is going to do. So for them, Pakistan is a mere tool of poking India. And as long as they keep funding Pakistan for terror-related initiatives towards India in what is seen as a camouflage warfare, they will continue to do so. The same people who talk about India's so-called atrocities against the minorities, when they talk about the attacks on Muslims because of CAA, or do not open their mouth on the way China deals with the Muslims in China itself. And that's really where the hypocrisy of the entire thing is. Now, I'll give you another example. So last year I did a course in Harvard online on religion, conflict, and peace, and there were many programs that the Harvard online has, you know, and you have complete China influence over there in the Harvard, complete China influence. You know, there are courses of studying the Mandarin language, you know, various other things that are there, all related to China. China's history, China's culture, China's this, China's that. A prestigious university like Harvard, over the years, has gotten corrupted by China influence. So China is not here only to play politics in just the Southeast Asian region, or the Asian region for that matter. It is here to play global politics, and they've been influencing all over. I remember when we as Goa Chronicle wrote against China during the COVID crisis. We were attacked. Our servers were being attacked, but our servers were not being attacked from China. They were attacked from locations in Europe. Italy was one of the main nations that were attacking our servers. And why is that? because it has a considerable population of Chinese as well and people who work with the Italian government. So China has been spread all over, and that's their main game. The main game is complete control of the world and the economics of the world. The only stumbling block to China that can emerge is not America, it is India. India is what China sees as their stumbling block. And therefore, we do not have to be enemies with China, but we have to be aware that their friendship does not augur well for us in the long run. And that is why you have China working its way to ensure that India does not reach the position it requires in the global stage. China is not a friend of India. China is clearly an enemy of India. And they are with Pakistan because Pakistan is an enemy of India and an enemy's enemy is a friend. So the main what are we looking at? Should we be aware of China? Of course, we need to be aware of China. Of course, we have to have diplomatic relationships with China. But decisions to ban the apps was one step. But how about looking at the various other aspects of the China intrusion into India? Go way back into this expose that we had done on the deal between the Congress and the CCP. That's the ILD of the CCP way back a couple of years ago, and how Congress tied up with this foreign covert intelligence agency of the China government and did an MOU with them in 2008. And that, of course, was an issue that Congress has never brought to the fore as to what were the contents of that particular MOU. We put out a certain amount of facts of that MOU, which was reported by a Chinese newspaper, Chinese news agency, Xinjiao at that time. And it clearly spoke about how they would work together on trade, how they would work together with India on infrastructure and various other aspects. And if you map how India MSME companies were not as supported as the companies from China, you would realize that the Indian MSME companies were back by 10 years because of this MOU that the AICC signed with the ILD, which is the Foreign Covert Intelligence Agency of the Chinese government. So while you see China as a nation, you have PLA as its army. The real danger threat of China is the International Liaison Department. And the International Liaison Department has huge tentacles, not only in Pakistan, they also have it within India itself, and they have it in most parts of the world. The ILD becomes the face of any movement into a particular country, and thereby they have their relationships with the media, with the corporate segments, with the politicians, and that's how they infiltrate. ILD has been infiltrating India since 2005, and ILD has been trying to ensure that they work within the segments like the MSME, which is why the Indian MSME segment was so bad over the last couple of years. It is only now that the Indian MSME is picked up. So we are not looking at China as fighting us at a war level. China is not interested in getting into a war. China is interested in economically crippling India. Now you continue to see, you will still see Chinese mobile phones are here. You will still see China loan apps. The recent expose that we had done, then it was picked up by the national channels. If you look at that, you have Chinese agents, people who are working for PLA, who during the COVID period were actually talking about these giving out loans through these loan apps. And these loan apps, people were taking money because they were desperate to take money. And all those companies are linked to China. And out of the 10 that were arrested, 5 of them were directly linked to the PLA. They were posing as Indian citizens. They had Aadhaar, they had PAN cards, they registered a company. But all the money that was getting routed through cryptocurrency was going to China. And that is how deep the penetration of China is. China is not your enemy that you will see right in your face. You would see them, very 10% of it will be in your face. But the real penetration of China is an economic attack on India. And that is what we need to be careful of. It is an economic attack of India in its relationships with other countries. How did China get a hold of Sri Lanka? China completely controls Sri Lanka right now. The whole idea is economic control. China wants to be the economic major in the world. It will outshine America within the next 10 to 15 years. The only competitor, like I said earlier, is India. And for that, they need to break India. And the only way they can break India is economically, through military tension, to communal tensions. And for that, they need Pakistan. China will never support India's stand in the UNSC because China knows that if India gets in there, then India becomes a voice that needs to be heard. So it has to continue to slice India by giving it 1,000 wounds. It will not come at India with one big bomb. It will slice at India with 1,000 wounds and make India bleed. Look at various different companies and their investments in China. If Chinese companies in India, they've come into infrastructure, they've come into startup companies. How are they doing that? We banned the apps. How come we are not banning the infrastructure investments or the foreign investments that are coming in? China will break India in the manner it needs to break India from all routes. And their most effective route is going to be the economic route. They're going to find ways to destabilize India from an economic point of view. That is why it is important for us to be Atmanirbhar, to create our own products. Today, the influx of these Chinese toys in India completely wiped out a huge segment, a potential segment of the toy industry in India. We allowed that during the UPA for China to take control of certain non-consequential businesses in political realm, but it's actually the most consequential because toys or MSME companies are the backbone of India. And my grouse with the Congress is just that. You signed a pact with the International Liaison Department, which is a foreign covert intelligence agency, and you broke the backbone of the MSMEs in India at that time. Today, China will not relent. China has the money. China has the penetration across the world. China has people who follow what the government tells them to because they are forced to follow. It's a communist country. More so, moving from communism, China is a country that's run by a dictator right now. Everybody was talking about the time when Xi Jinping was not around. There was speculation that China is in trouble. Lots of things are going wrong. There will be a time that China will self implode. People in China will revolt. It will happen within the next 10 years. That will happen, and it will happen because there is a point where you cannot take dictatorship, and Xi Jinping is a dictator. He's going to go far more than Mao is ever gone, and he's ruthless. And the mere fact that you had the COVID coming out of China and not a single person has decided to make China accountable for the millions of deaths around the world. Not one political leader is making China accountable. That is the power of China. So India is against a formidable enemy. China can never be taken lightly. China is not working at the interest of India, and therefore we must treat China not as a friend, but China as an enemy that needs to be dealt with in the same manner they are dealing with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Savio, for that big picture on the China threat there. Thanks so much for that. We now move on to our next speaker, Abhijit Iyer. Mitra, I know you speaking third means that a lot of ground has been covered already, and it's very difficult. But Abhijit, you always surprise me with new perspectives. So I'm hoping to hear a new perspective from you this time too. The time is yours, Abhijit. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Vipindra sir. It's obviously a joy always to speak after Rakesh Sharma ji. He gives too much credit to my intellect. He, of course, is a real general, unlike all us armchair types. And Savio, of course, is a dear, dear friend. But I think, for me, the topic was, does China speak with a forked tongue and why? And so I'm going to agree mostly with what General Sharma says and add some different context to it, and generally agree with Savio, but also disagree with him slightly. So in order to answer, does China speak with a forked tongue, we also have to understand, do everybody else speak with a forked tongue? So for example, does India speak with a forked tongue? Does the rest of the world speak with a forked tongue? And I was told at one point of time by I won't say a particularly smart Indian diplomat, but an Indian diplomat nevertheless, that speaking with a forked tongue is what is called diplomacy. And there are literally people called diplomats who are paid to speak with a forked tongue with absolute incredulity, without ever, losing your composure. And as an old saying goes, a diplomat is a man sent abroad to lie for his country. So we basically get to, let's look at India. We keep saying we don't support terror here and there. And I can tell you as a kid, I've gone to LTTE training camps, which Indira Gandhi was running near my house in Madras. So we were quite happy to support those training camps. We support the statement that came out from Arindam Bagchi today was in response to the UN resolution you spoke about Uyghurs in Xinjiang, was that, we don't vote on country-specific resolutions. I can show you about 10 times in the last 5 years where we voted against Israel on country-specific resolutions. So, from that point of view, we vote against our allies. And you have to admire China, how loyal it is to its allies, that even the sheer shamelessness of voting for terror to prevent blacklisting of terror organizations, for an ally, for a dear ally like Pakistan, they're willing to do it. Not once, but repeatedly, over and over and over again. That makes India a bad ally, and that makes China a very good ally. So, you'll also find this about India. You'll find this about the West as well. So, all this furor about Russia violating sovereignty and its illegal war in Ukraine and whatnot. What do you think the 2001 invasion of Iraq was? What do you think the NATO bombing campaign in Kosovo was? And in Kosovo, they actually held a referendum and gave it independence. So, when they say this is in violation of international law, you ask them which law, show me the law. They never show you the law, and they immediately turn around and call you a Kremlin apologist. And then the other segment says, oh, but that involves independence. It doesn't involve annexation to another country. Well, Donetsk and Lugansk had referendums for independence. They first became independent, and then of their own independent will, they joined Russia. So, this is like saying that once it has been removed by force, it cannot join, etc., etc. So, forked tongue is very natural. I think the reason China's forked tongue doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is in India, we keep having these conversations about China's forked tongue. And there's a reason for it. The first reason is that, we have to understand that they have a very clear strategic logic. I would highly recommend that our audience read this book by Alastair Ian Johnston, Strategic Culture in China. And he shows you dynasty after dynasty, including the foreign dynasties, the Qing dynasty, which was the Manchu dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, which was the Mongol dynasty, the Tang dynasty, which was technically a Turkic dynasty, apparently. They were originally Turks. All of them followed one principle. When you are weak, you pretend to be, we are the divine kingdom, the celestial kingdom, the middle kingdom, under the gods, and we forgive everybody around us. And when they get strong, they don't give a damn about what is right or what is wrong, and they crush everybody in the borders and homogenize them forcibly. This has been their culture, unchanged, for the last 2,250 years, since Qin Shi Huangdi unified China. The second issue is, I think there's a big lack of Chinese language scholarship in India and access to Chinese sources in India. I think there's only one think tank. I think Jaidev Ranadesa's think tank does that Chinese language translation. But other than that, we don't really have Chinese language translation. And I personally fear nothing more than Indian students who go to China to learn Chinese. If you think JNU tukre types are bad, then the Indian students who go to China to learn Chinese are a lot worse. They actually repeat Chinese talking points way better. But China is different, you see. What is different about the Uyghur genocide? Do Uyghurs not have the same feelings? Do they not have children? Do they not have the same religious sensitivities? So what is different? But China is different. So you have a whole bunch of these so-called China interpreters who come back, who actually act as China apologists. The third, and this is where I slightly disagree with Savio, is while they've had the same policy for the last 2,000 years, they in fact do not have that crystal-eyed determination for China. What the Communist Party and what every dynasty before it had, you can just call this the CCP dynasty. There was the Ming dynasty, the Qing dynasty, and the CCP dynasty. It's just one more dynasty in China. Was self-preservation of the dynasty. Or in this case, the preservation of the Communist Party, not the preservation of China per se. So what you'll see is that very frequently it is considerably at odds at what is in China's interests. Let me give you a simple example. There is not a single part of infrastructure in China that is not on the verge of bankruptcy. They started off very well. With Deng Xiaoping, they started off very well with infrastructure building and all of that. But starting from the 2008 financial crisis, where, during financial crises, government should spend more instead of spend less. This is a lesson we learned during the Great Depression in the 1930s. You should spend more. They never got off it. It became addictive like cocaine. I would say this is China's second opium war. Of course, it's not the British doing it, it's the Communist Party doing it to China. The British did opium, the Chinese Communist Party does this constant cash infusion. So you have things like the railway system, high-speed rail, which every Indian goes gaga about. There's a reason we haven't built it in India. Because the returns to investment don't work for big countries like us. It works for small European countries like France or Germany. It works for a small country like Taiwan. Even in Japan, it only works properly in the main island Honshu, which is why you don't see inter-island crossings. Of course, there's the weather and all of that to do with it as well, but you don't see that happening. You look at the Evergrande or Evergreen, I forget what the company was, that collapsed just a few months back. That is another thing. The entire construction industry out there is collapsing. So you will see a lot of things where China does not tend to have vision. And the clearest sense where you can see where China's interest is different from the Communist Party's interest is in terms of democratization. Now, this democracy development, you think it's all American propaganda and things like that. Let me give you the anthropology of it. What happens is, a pre-industrial society needs extremely strong centralized rule in order to industrialize. You've seen this in Britain, you've seen this in America, you've seen this in China, you've seen this in the USSR, in the Russian Empire, ultimately USSR, ultimately Russia again, and things like that. But once you hit the digital age and the information age, the government needs to take a back seat. The digital age started in the 1980s, and this was the reason all the tiger economies, which are horrible dictatorships. South Korea was a terrible dictatorship. There was literally no difference between South Korea and North Korea in terms of how they oppressed their population in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Well, up to the early 80s. Same in Taiwan. Taiwan was a horrible fascist government, which used to go around killing all its opponents. Singapore is still not entirely a democracy. And yet what happened was, because they prioritized the well-being of their country, once they industrialized, once the digital and information age starts, they move into democracy, not because they have any great love of democracy, but because the information age requires you to decentralize, right? China is not doing that. This is why it is stuck in a middle income trap. How long have we seen them stuck at variously that somewhere between $10,000 to $11,000 per capita mark? For the last, 5, 6, 7 years, they just haven't been moving up. Their economy keeps expanding, but why isn't their income expanding? Clearly, there's a problem out there. So they're stuck in a middle income trap because they prioritize state control over the well-being of China. And this is a strategic opportunity for India. A very dear friend told me that, India's biggest liability is Modi's ego and India's greatest opportunity is Xi Jinping's stupidity. I don't know about the first part, but the second part I can tell you is absolutely true. Even 12 years back, when you went to Beijing and interacted with universities and things like that, think tanks in Beijing, behind closed doors, you could have a fairly frank discussion and a critique of Chinese foreign policy. Today, even behind closed doors, they are too petrified to talk because he's literally locking up everybody who disagrees with him. In the foreign ministry, for the foreign ministry in China, as everybody knows, is irrelevant. It's the military that calls the shots. You go and ask for a cost-benefit analysis of OBOR, or what BRI, or whatever it's called today. If you're an Indian, you won't get it. If you're a Chinese and ask for it, you'll probably get locked up. So China has been very, very, I think this Chinese wisdom is overhyped. On the other hand, they are tactically very good, if not strategically very good. A simple example is Pakistan and nukes. And this is an example of their forked tongue. They continued supplying Pakistan with nuclear weapons or, either directly or through claimed grandmother clauses for nuclear reactors. Well after signing the NPT, without safeguards. You see, they did the same thing with North Korea. There's a report as late as 2011 or 2012 by the UN, which shows you the Pakistan, Beijing, North Korea nuclear smuggling nexus, which is run under government control, but not directly by the government, which operates out of Beijing, whose whole job it is to match nuclear weapons designs with missile designs and things like that. And it turns out the North Koreans were giving them, when being terribly honest with the Chinese, because their missile designs were actually extremely advanced. People tend to forget that North Korea was the successful country. South Korea was considered the failure right up to 1979. Till 1979, North Korea had the second highest per capita income in Asia after Japan. Till 1979, North Korea had a much higher standard of living than South Korea. North Korea was the rich one. So you see this with them. They don't have a forked tongue. It's just that our scholarship fails to see what they do and where they do it. Our friend Savio just spoke about Chinese influence operations and how Dr. Death, let's not call him Dr. Ted, we'll call him Dr. Death because that's what he is, the head of the WHO, got away with this stellar mismanagement of a criminal mismanagement of COVID. Remember, a lot of countries do influence operations. When you look at half of the Indian journalists who get invited to the States on some junket or another, who are we kidding? America runs influence operations in this country. You have the American embassy tweeting out congratulatory notes to known sold out journalists. Very openly they do it. Something the Chinese embassy does not do openly. We also need to understand that Chinese are very clear about what their regional tactic is. They do not really believe in allies. They believe in assets and liabilities. And even within the assets, there is an asset liability management. What they like their assets to do is to become free radicals, which is to become America likes regional powerhouses. China either likes regional powerhouses or they love regional nuisances. So they gift nuclear weapons to bog down regional adversaries. They give nuclear weapons to North Korea to keep South Korea and Japan down, to have these tactical problems which will force them to focus on North Korea and not focus on China. They give Pakistan nuclear weapons to keep India down similarly, etc., etc., etc. And initially, when the nuclear weapons transfer happened, it was also to keep the USSR down. People tend to forget that the USSR actually played a much bigger role in the calculus of China giving Pakistan nuclear weapons than India did. Why? Because China was not on good terms with Russia and with the USSR in those days. They genuinely feared another outbreak. And at that time, remember, the USSR was ahead of China. Today, China is way ahead of Russia. But in those days, it was not. So China was actually supplying the Afghan Taliban with a lot. And one of the things that China did to fortify Pakistan against a possible Soviet strike, retaliatory strike for supporting the Taliban in those days, was to give them, not the Taliban, sorry, the Mujahideen, I keep saying Taliban, sorry, the Mujahideen in those days, was to give them nuclear weapons. Of course, Pakistan being Pakistan always saw it as first deterrence against India. They knew Russia wouldn't do anything to them. But that the Chinese logic was very clear. So there are three things we totally need to understand. First is they are very strategic in certain senses. No, I would say strategic. They are inflexible in terms of how they see strength and weakness, their own strength and weakness. The second is that they thrive in an environment that doesn't understand Chinese nuance, Chinese language, or doesn't do really get primary research on China. Third, they have all the weaknesses that the rest of us do. They've literally screwed over their own economy in a way where it would be very, very difficult to recover. And fourth, they have consistently played, at least for the period of the Communist Party, they have consistently played the game of regional free radicals. And as long as we understand that, we need to be very clear that China does not say one thing. China does not speak to the forked tongue. It actually does exactly what it says in its own internal literature. It may be a translation error that, as bad as we are with Mandarin, they may be quite bad with English, which is why they sound to be speaking with a forked tongue outside. But overall, I would say China has been very consistent, and at some point, India needs to introspect. In fact, in Beijing, they will consistently tell you that it is India who speaks with a forked tongue. I've literally sat in on meetings where they tell me, your foreign ministry is more loyal, that is the Indian foreign ministry, is more loyal to China than the Chinese foreign ministry is. They always find one reason or another to apologize for China. On the other hand, they find that the Indian military is too bellicose, that they're almost irrationally bellicose, they claim. I don't think so, but that is their claim. They're probably using it as a feint. But they keep wondering, this is some great strategic move by India to use the foreign ministry to seduce us, the carrot, and use the military, the stick, to beat them up. And therefore, Indians are highly duplicitous people. They will trust Americans, they will trust Russians, but they will not trust Indians. At some point, we have to look within and reconcile ourselves. So why do we keep getting taken by a ride for China? Why do we keep getting taken by surprise by China? Why do we even think that as long as China sits in the UN Security Council, we will ever get into the UN Security Council? And why do we engage in this cringe-inducing behavior of not going after China and pulling our punches when China is concerned, out of fear that they would use this in some record book to veto our membership of the UNSC later on, a membership that they're not going to allow us to have anyway? So I'll end here.
Very good, there, Abhijit. Thank you so much for that perspective. Before we go into the question answer session, I'm just posting a link for the participants who has never previously registered with Law and Society Alliance. If you want to contribute, if you want to participate in any future events of Law and Society Alliance, I've just posted it in the chat box. Just click there and go and register yourself. I assure you, we will get back to you and get in touch with you. Several participants today are those whom we have got back and made them participate in our events frequently. Thank you so much for that. And the first question I have is for Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. Sir, you did mention about the terror fear that China has in East Turkestan with regards to organizations that exist there. But I see a double speak there because when it comes to terrorism in my soil, I don't want it to happen. But if it is a terrorism in somebody else's soil, I'm okay with it. So this kind of a attitude, I believe, is a double speak when it comes to global terrorism context. If the world has to fight terrorism jointly, together, and in some kind of a cohesion, then probably this kind of double speak is dangerous for China, I believe. So, what is your view on this, sir?
So, you go back to the age-old thing about own national interests. In matters of own national interests, if I have to do double speak, so be it. Yeah. For my own country, I don't mind lying here. I mean, I'll go to any length to the benefit of the national interests of my country, and I'll lie with a deadpan face. So the Chinese do the same thing. They have great anxieties on Uyghurs. That's why, they pick up those people from Urumqi and bring them to Taklamakan Desert. And there, Taklamakan Desert, there they have put those many camps out there for Uyghurs. So their anxiety, we follow some of these camps in life, and they made life hell. It is, I mean, I could name the Nazi camps. Yeah, so they have got great anxieties on Uyghurs because they do not know how to handle the Muslim nation. And that's why it's a big problem situation for them. And I think we need to fan the trouble. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, Vipender? Why not? Yeah. See,
Yes.
When people say, "Hum Dharmatma Yudhishthir," there was only one Yudhishthir, na. Krishna was not Yudhishthir. Krishna said, "So what? Karan ke haath mein तीर नहीं, हथियार नहीं है, उसका गर्दन काट दो." Krishna was also in Dharam Yudh, na. You killed Karan when he was not carrying a weapon. Yeah. You said क्या कहते हैं, अश्वत्थामा मारा गया पर हाथी नहीं. You did badmashi, na. So there is badmashi, yeah. There is culturally badmashi. Everybody is not Yudhishthir. Why are we being Yudhishthir? We have to. Somebody's got to actually see. I always enjoy listening to Abhijit. Of course, I got slightly pained and my stents were paining when he said Indian military irrationally bellicose. But that apart, the the fact of the matter is,
sir, वो मैंने नहीं बोला, वो
किसी दोस्त ने बोला था.
Yeah.
And I caveated it saying I disagree.
I know,
I agree with their foreign policy, but yeah, not with
I got you. You're right. And the Abhijit, if we are not bellicose, our own country won't listen to us of the threat about China. You have to get bellicose. You have to say there is, yeah, like you rightly pointed out, there is a democracy. And Mr. Savvy also said there is a very elephant sitting on you, more than a dragon sitting on your head if you don't make noise. So what I want to say is that we should engage with people. There is an organization which deals with Baltis in UK. or the Baluchis in UK, or those people who we can make friends with. Yeah, why don't we make friends with? I hope we are doing it. Maybe we are doing it. So the fact of the matter is, and to answer your question simply, the Chinese have an Achilles heel. Many of them, you got many Achilles heels. One is their own public. Their own public, the contract that the CCP has, social contract, and with their public is the anxiety that the public will get angry one day and they'll be on Tiananmen Square or whatever. We have to get things right. We have to fight not on the borders, but same way cognitively as they are doing to us. So if they are doing doublespeak, I just want to ask a question. These people, gentlemen are experts as savvy. What would have happened in case we had voted against China in the United Nations Human Rights Committee 2-3 days ago? Kya hota? Chinese would have been annoyed. Are they happy with us? They're not happy with us. So if they'll be more annoyed, so be it. If tomorrow there's a resolution on Kashmir by Pakistanis with Chinese support us or abstain, they won't do it. Let's get on with it. Yeah? अगर लड़ाई है तो लड़ना ही है. चलो ठीक है लड़ेंगे. Thank you.
So thank you so much, sir. I am a Krishna Bhakt, sir. If you give me Krishna as his example, I will never differ with you on any opinion. Thank you so much. So, okay, I have another question. This question is for Savio. Savio, one of our participants has asked you, he wants you to strategize on how to, counter this influence operation that Communist China does in other nations, particularly in the context of India. That's what they want. I mean, it's a very large question. I understand that, but whatever, I think you will be able to answer. How do you strategize to counter that? Savio? Okay, I think Savio has got disconnected. Okay, we'll go on to the next question to Abhijit. Abhijit, I think you talked about Achilles' heel. I think General talked about Achilles' heel. I believe democracy as an issue is a big Achilles' heel for communist China. Uh, you know, uh, where do you think we can create some trouble for them on that front?
Right. So I'm going to link this question because it is a linkage to what General Sharma said. See, I am, you know from my Twitter rants, I'm very anti-Vaishnavite, anti-Iyengar and things like that. So I'm a Shaivite. I come from the Shakta tradition of Bengal. But Krishna has always been my favorite god for precisely that reason. Right? Like Sir said, Ashwatthama Hatho, Narova Kunjaro and things like that. That is very crucial. My issue with the Indian government is not that we are two-faced. My issue is that we are not two-faced enough. We need to be much more two-faced. We are not being what Krishna taught us. Instead, we are following the story of Satyavadi Harishchandra. And you know what happened to Satyavadi Harishchandra? And Krishna never had to suffer in his life. Krishna led the good life throughout. And tell me one story from the Mahabharata where Krishna is ever suffering. He's always stealing butter from somebody, stealing toys from somebody, having a good life throughout. तुम कृष्णा की तरह बिहेव करोगे तो बहुत बड़ा मिलेगा तुम्हारे जिंदगी में. पर तुम सत्यवादी हरिश्चंद्र का व्यवहार करोगे तो सत्यवादी हरिश्चंद्र की तरह, देवदास की तरह रोते रहोगे. So, democracy is one of those things where we need to be absolutely hypocritical. See, democracy is the best way of destroying the Chinese Communist Party. Right? It destroys its hold on power. They will fundamentally, if then there is a transition away, whether it is to democracy or not shouldn't matter that much. The moment democracy sets in, there are certain constricting factors that democracy imposes on your foreign policy, which makes it impossible. So, the Golden Arches theory that countries that have McDonald's tend not to fight with each other. It's not entirely true, but kind of true. This democratic validation theory. It is partially true in that it is not the validation, it is the kind of checks and balances that get built in. And that's the good kind of influence buying. The problem in India is that China buys influence in India, America buys influence in India, but we don't have the money to buy influence either in DC or in Beijing. आप देखो Washington Post और New York Times में there are two columnists who I will not name. Every fortnight it is India is a fascist state, India is a big threat, India is this. As opposed to a country which is actually sending 2 million Muslims to concentration camps, and they are not a fascist state. There will be one headline story in New York Times once in 3 years about it, but about India, India is a fascist state every 2 weeks. Right? So the democracy is one of those fantastic ways which we need to use. And like General Sharma said, we need to make friends with people. President Ing-wen Tsai of Taiwan, she wished Narendra Modi on India's independence anniversary. We never reciprocate. यार एक tweet मारने में क्या जाता है? How is that against two China policy? India is more committed to the one China policy. India is more committed to the one China policy than China itself is committed to the one China policy. The Chinese president has on several occasions met the Taiwanese president. But the Indian Prime Minister is too scared even to tweet to the Taiwanese president. ये क्या तमाशा है? So this is something we really need to think about. And what the point that Sir made is the third part of my answer to your question, which is अगर हम China के खिलाफ वोट करेंगे, क्या होगा? At best, China will be upset. It is actually more. We are creating currency. We are creating diplomatic currency by voting against China, because right now we do not vote against China. So when China blocks something, we have to trade something to them in return for a vote. Whereas if you keep voting against China, you give up something in return that costs you nothing. You say, China, you vote for this guy to get blacklisted, then we will stop voting against you. Right? So it is actually a creation of diplomatic capital that our foreign service is not doing, which means we have to give actual concessions to China in return for something, instead of giving them freebies which mean nothing to us.
Thanks, Abhijit. Fantastic debate, wonderful views there. I was really happy to have this discussion with all the three panelists today. Savio, I believe, is not in Goa. He's not at home. He's somewhere in Coimbatore attending an event, probably because of which he had to log out sometime in between, or maybe there is a Wi-Fi issue, so we are not able to pose a question to him. But fabulous debate. Thank you so much. And as usual, I enjoy this kind of open, remarks from my panelists, and this is another wonderful debate that we had. Lot of takeaways, lot of things to take home from this debate, and I especially like the points about giving trouble back to the Chinese wherever it is possible. So with that last remark, I would like to announce our next event, which will happen around October 16th, which is a Sunday, when the 20th Party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party will happen. Probably by the time we host our event, most things would be clear. So I'm hoping to debate Xi Jinping and what happens in that Congress meeting, in the Party Congress on 16th of October. With that announcement, I thank all my three panelists. Savio, who's not here, but I'll anyway call him up and thank him for joining, despite not being at his home. Abhijit, thank you once again. Wonderful listening to you as usual, and thanks for accepting my invitation. Immediately, and once again, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma is my mentor, so I have to keep thanking him throughout my life for the knowledge and the wisdom that he has shared on various subjects.
On 16th, you're calling Z for the talk?
Why not, sir? Why not? If he's willing to join. In fact, let me tell you, sir, I'm a Global Times certified anti-CCP campaigner. So I wear it as a badge of honor. In fact, my Twitter bio, the Law and Society Alliance's Twitter bio carries it as a badge of honor. So if he's willing to come and take questions from generals like you, I'm more than happy to invite him. So
Thank you for inviting us, sir.
yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Abhijit, and thank all the participants for being patiently hearing to this event. And without them, this event would have not been possible. So I thank all of you. You have a nice evening, and let us meet again in another event another time. Thank you.